Welcome, everyone, to day 2 of the 2021 Bold Open, a segment that we're calling the Protein Innovation Showcase. Yesterday, if you could not join us, we heard from Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Tom Peterson, the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. We also heard 10 challenges yesterday in the Protein Challenge that we hope will help accelerate innovative solutions to industry challenges and enhance Minnesota's global reputation as an innovative center in food and agriculture. Hopefully already you've had an opportunity to connect with a company who offered a challenge or will soon submit a proposal to help solve their innovation needs through a new partnership. Today we plan to drill down on some protein efforts that are already underway by some Minnesota organizations related to sustainability and protein product innovation. Before we meet our panel today, I want to turn it over to AURI's Executive Director Shannon Schlecht to frame up this conversation with some statistics on the importance of the protein market to Minnesota agriculture and to supplying the global market demand for protein. Shannon?
Before we get started today, let's hear from Commissioner Tom Peterson about Minnesota agriculture, the Bold Open, and the importance of the protein market. Commissioner?
Hi, I'm Tom Peterson, Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, and it's my pleasure to welcome and thank you for attending the Bold Open. We're thankful to our hosts, AURI and the MBOLD Coalition. The theme this year is Protein Innovation, Enhancing Sustainability of Animal Proteins and Advancing Plant and Other Novel Proteins. 10 organizations and companies have already presented their reverse pitches on the critical challenges facing the protein industry. But I'm here to say Minnesota has a lot of real strengths and assets to make us a great choice for hosting this challenge. Minnesota, as you may know, is home to global food and agricultural companies whose products reach consumers in more than 125 countries around the world, including well-known industry leaders such as Cargill, General Mills, Land O'Lakes, and Hormel. Minnesota is an innovation incubator in the food industry, ranking 4th in food product patents per capita in the U.S. Minnesota has twice the concentration of food scientists and technologists as the national average. Minnesota also has a strong ecosystem of companies that support the food manufacturing industry, including Ecolab and 3M, and some of the top companies that support retail foods in the U.S., such as Target, UNFI, C.H. Robinson, and of course, Peterson. Minnesota has a comprehensive transportation infrastructure, including a top-rated international airport with non-stop service to all points of the U.S., as well as international markets in Asia, Europe, and North America. More than 50% of the U.S. population is within a day's truck drive of Minnesota, and we have easy access to Canada, as well as commercial ports on the Great Lakes and the Mississippi River. We rank 6th in the U.S. in terms of infrastructure based on road quality, use of renewable energy, broadband internet access, according to the U.S. News and World Report. Several foreign-owned companies, food companies, already have significant operations in Minnesota, including Kerry, Arnua, and Agripur. We have plenty of businesses, we have plentiful business resources to assist food and beverage companies, including the University of Minnesota, which has many food science experts and supports the industry through its research. Grow North MN provides information and programs to help food and agriculture entrepreneurs grow and scale their business. One of my favorites, the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute, or ARI, partners with businesses and entrepreneurs and to develop new uses for agricultural products. Techstars Farm to Fork Accelerator is a mentorship-driven accelerator for startups from around the world that's funded by Cargill and Ecolab. Enterprise Minnesota offers assistance and counseling to manufacturing in Minnesota. Minnesota is also a global leader in soil health, developing systems to enable farmers to protect water and provide climate solutions through implementation of soil health principles. And of course, here at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, the Minnesota Department of Economic Development, we have significant resources, including information, financing and grant programs, technical assistance, and more. Many of these great companies and organizations are part of the MBOLD Coalition, which is doing great work to make Minnesota stay at the forefront of food, agriculture, nutrition, and innovation. We're glad to have you join us today and look forward to seeing you and seeing what you people have to come up with to address the challenges of today and tomorrow. Thank you very much.
And welcome everyone to day 2 of the Bold Open. It's great to be advancing protein innovation with all of you today as we look at how we can move innovation opportunities forward. As Dan said, I hope that many of you were able to join us yesterday for the challenge portion. And today we get to hear from our collaborators and industry participants on what they're doing in the innovation space. Next slide, please. So as we look at, and you can advance one more, please. As we look at the protein market, first I'll just give a quick background on AURI. We are a 30-year-old nonprofit focused on advancing opportunities in the agricultural space, mainly on value-added agriculture, working with crops and animals and egg products, and looking at how we can enhance that commercialization journey of an idea into the marketplace. As I said, we've been at this for over 30 years, and protein is such a critical piece of the element of work that we do to advancing opportunities for Minnesota food and agriculture and for the region in terms of value-added creation and rural economic development. When we look at protein for the state of Minnesota, it's an important aspect of our agriculture. We look at the marketing value going back to 2019 statistics of $16.7 billion in marketing value for the crops and the livestock that are produced and raised within the state. Through a study that AgriGrowth recently conducted, the value added element of that is $37 billion. So it's, again, a large component of the economic contribution to our state's economy. You can look that we're pretty evenly split too, which I find pretty interesting in terms of the value of livestock creation as well as crops that are produced here, with that 47% livestock, 53% crops, and where Minnesota ranks in the US in terms of its production of crops and livestock at number 5 and number 7 respectively. So again, just highlighting the importance of agriculture and protein to our agricultural economy. Next slide, please. If we dig into the livestock side of this sector, that 47%, you can see we have some pretty great diversity in terms of the livestock that is raised within the state. We are number 1 in turkeys raised, and we'll hear from the Minnesota Turkey Growers Association a little bit later on. We're number 2 in hogs, and we have the Minnesota Pork Board with us today as well. Number 5 in meat animals overall, number 7 in dairy, and number 8 in milk production, and then number 9 in cattle and cows for our beef producers. So we have, again, just showcasing that diversity of the protein or traditional proteins that we're producing within the state of Minnesota. Next slide, please. And we have a lot of crop proteins as well. What I would consider here are protein crops that are used for animal feed, mainly, or for human food use that have a higher protein concentration in their production. So we're number 1 in green peas for processing, number 2 in dry beans, number 3 in soybeans, which is one of our largest acreage crops, number 3 in sunflowers, number 3 in spring wheat, which is the highest protein wheat that's produced, and then number 3 in oats and number 4 in canola. So you can see in the rankings, we're in the top 5 of a lot of different crops that are used for protein in terms of either animal feed or human food use. Next slide, please. And we've got a lot of companies that are looking at protein innovation and the needs. And as Dan mentioned, we had 10 companies that pitched protein innovation challenges yesterday, and others that were supporting the protein platform as well. We had protein challenges in just a wide range of areas, from protein extraction methods to byproduct utilization, to new animal feed alternatives, to financial constraints and how do we scale protein production, to challenges in marketing protein products, to new crop introductions like winter camelina, to shelf life improvements for protein products, and to new business models for protein products as well. So a wide range of innovations that we looked at yesterday in terms of looking for new and creative ideas that can help enhance the protein sector and really overcome some of these industry challenges around protein. And we also had sustainability challenges. We had enteric methane reduction for dairy producers, and we had frameworks for more sustainable beef production, both from a sustainability standpoint, from the economics and the environmental impact. So just some great challenges that were thrown out there yesterday for ideation and looking for collaborations and partnership. And if we go to the next slide, we can showcase some of the sustainability efforts underway as well. I mentioned a couple of the innovation challenges that we heard from yesterday, but we also have many organizations that are working on sustainability initiatives and trying to move the needle forward on producing more products with fewer resources. And these are just a handful. There's many more initiatives that are underway, and I think we'll hear from a few today from our panelists. But MBOLD has a water and soil health pillar where they're looking at new crops and really focus on regenerative agriculture and soil health. Midwest Dairy and their participation in the Dairy's Net Zero Initiative. Many efforts underway by the corporates and the large agribusinesses underway here. The Department of Agriculture has had a Minnesota Agriculture Water Quality Certification program in place for many years. And the Forever Green Initiative from the University of Minnesota and the efforts that they're doing around cover crops and new opportunities. And like I said, those are just a handful of the many efforts that are underway here. Next slide, please. And we heard yesterday that this protein demand is real, right? So there's a challenge of feeding the world, right, as we increase population, as economic GDP grows, as well as doing it in a more sustainable manner. So protein products, practices, and ways that we can scale up protein production in a more sustainable manner. Mark Greenwood from Compeer Financial shared this slide yesterday in terms of the growth that we're seeing in the protein area, very highly correlated to GDP. And as we go forward from that 2020 to 2030 mark, that's nearly 80 million metric more tons of protein, of traditional protein, animal protein that's being projected to meet global demand as we continue moving forward. Next slide. And we're also seeing some tremendous growth in alternative proteins and plant proteins, and we'll hear about that today as well from our panelists and what's going on in the protein space. And you can see that the growth rate is pretty phenomenal. And at AURI, we're seeing it across the board as well, from innovation needs in animal proteins, plant proteins, as well as insect proteins and other areas as well, where innovators and entrepreneurs and others are looking at how do we meet this growing protein demand, and what are some opportunities that we can really try to move forward. Next slide. And with that, I'll end my remarks on just providing an overview of what's happening in Minnesota from a more localized perspective of the innovation that we're seeing in protein and just the interest in protein from our industry associations, our entrepreneurs, our innovators, our researchers in really advancing some opportunities. And we've got a great panel from Purist, Minnesota Turkey, Minnesota Pork Board, and the University of Minnesota here today to really dig deeper into some of their efforts, how they're looking at innovation and how they're looking at protein and what the future looks like for their organizations in meeting growing consumer demand. So with that, Dan, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, Shannon, thank you very much. And as we get ready to introduce our panelists, just a little bit of housekeeping here. We want to remind you that you can submit questions today in the chat portal on your screen, and then we will try to get to as many of those as possible. But please do mute yourself at this time, and we do ask just for the convenience of everybody who's presenting that you remain muted during the presentations. So what I'm going to do is quickly introduce our four panelists, let them give you a brief overview of their organizations and how they view the protein demand here in Minnesota or around the world. Today we'll be welcoming Sarah Anderson, the Executive Director of Minnesota Turkey, Julie Mann, the Chief Innovation Officer of Purist Holdings. Dave Preisler is here. He's the CEO of Minnesota Pork, and Job Eubink, the Professor and Department Head for Food Science and Nutrition at the University of Minnesota. We'll start with Sarah. Please introduce yourself and Minnesota Turkey.
Good morning, Dan, and thank you to AURI for including Minnesota Turkey in this process. I'm excited to hear more about what my fellow commodity groups think about the innovation that's going to be happening here in the next coming years. For the Minnesota Turkey Growers Association, if you're not familiar with this, I'm neglecting to do my job, but Minnesota is home to the largest number of turkeys produced in the nation. And I find that a lot of people aren't familiar with that statistic because we are a quiet bunch that keep our heads down and do some good hard work to provide that level of production here in the state of Minnesota. In addition to that, we are also home to the largest number of independent turkey growers. So I think that speaks to the large generational farming community that we have, where parents are passing on their knowledge and wisdom of farming onto the next generation. That makes Minnesota a long-lasting #1 in the state, or in the nation, excuse me. We also have 3 processors in the state of Minnesota. We have Jennie-O Turkey Store. We also have Turkey Valley, which is based out of the Marshall area. They grow free-range turkeys, antibiotic-free turkeys. And then we also have Northern Pride, which is up in the Thief River Falls area. They do some organic products and some other products that I'll get into later on. On top of that, we have Select Genetics, which is based out of Wilmer too, and they are kind of a STEM incubator, if you will, but they're also the largest hatchery in the nation. So it's just really exciting what we have going on within our industry. 600 farms, we've got $1 billion worth of economic activity that we provide to the state, as well as providing 26,000 jobs. So we're excited to be a part of this process and advancing innovation that helps not just Minnesota, but our entire nation and the world.
Thank you, Sarah, and we'll certainly get back to you with some perspective on some of the questions that are asked today. Julie, please tell us a little bit more about you and about the work that you do.
Hello, Dan. Thank you very much for introducing me today. I'm very happy to be participating on this panel. It's a very exciting time for, I think, for the food industry in general, but for the plant-based world. We're really driving forward a lot of initiatives that are supporting both the current food infrastructure that we have, as well as building the potential for a different type of future, with plant-based proteins being, I would say, a bigger portion of that than what we've seen over the past years. So let me introduce myself first. I'm Julie Mann, Chief Innovation Officer for Purus Holdings. If you don't know Purus is a plant-based company. So we are basically, our aspiration is to be a plant-strong planet. We really are building at this point, and have been building since around 1985. The founders, this is a family company, and they've been driving forward to have an end-to-end food system that we're building that is sustainable and regenerative. So when I say an end-to-end food system, what we're really driving for is starting with seed genetics of plant-based materials such as pea, all the way through crops, bringing those crops into an ingredient format that we can provide for customers and consumers in the food industry. And then also, we've been building a piece that helps to get better food products, better plant-based products into the marketplace. So we're doing some food science and product development to bring those ingredients that we're working on to life in finished foods. And the goal is, if we can really make those foods preferred or very much liked by the consumer base, we know that we can help accelerate plant-based foods coming to market, and supporting the fact that we're going to likely need to provide a lot more food and protein, by 2050, probably 10 billion people. So we're really driving to make that happen. So thank you again for the introduction, and I look forward to speaking on the panel today.
Very good, Julie. Thank you for being here. Let's turn to Minnesota Pork and Minnesota Pork Production. Dave Preisler is with us. Dave, a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. And it's a pleasure to be here. Been with the Minnesota Pork Producers Association and Minnesota Pork Board for just about 27 years now. So it's been a long journey and a good journey. And during that period of time, though, is that one of the things that's really happened with pork production in Minnesota and the United States, and in the world for that matter, is really a complete restructuring. And so because of technology, because of people that are really innovative, and quite honestly, Minnesota has some of the best innovators, not only from a farm standpoint, but also a veterinary medicine standpoint in the world. And so it's brought us to a really good position. So in the last 25 years, we've actually doubled pork production in Minnesota. So it's been a growth industry here. and not by leaps and bounds, but by about a pretty consistent, percent and a half, some years 2% per year. And so I would call pretty sustainable growth. It's 100% family owned. Part of that is due to the Minnesota corporate farm law, but it's been, I think, really something that is not talked about a lot, but the money that's made on Minnesota farms stays here and gets reinvested in Minnesota's rural economy and really helps to make that hum. We do have 4 pork processing plants in Minnesota. 2 of the larger plants, JBS in Worthington, and also Hormel in Austin. And then we also got a plant in Windham owned by High Life, and then a plant in Laverne owned by Lynch Livestock. Roughly half of the pigs that we produce in Minnesota are processed here in Minnesota, and then the other half go to neighboring states for processing. And so we really depend on some of the things that happen in those states to make sure that we've got animals that can freely flow across borders. And so that's why animal health is something that's extremely important to us, not only domestically as we move animals across state borders, but then also internationally. So other than that, again, happy to be here, and on behalf of the 3,000 farms that raise pigs in Minnesota, I'm looking forward to the discussion here for the rest of the time.
Very good. Thanks, Dave. And that leaves us with our 4th panelist today, and that is Jobs at the University of Minnesota. So opportunity here, Job, for a little introduction and a little bit about your work there at the U.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. It's a pleasure to be also part of this panel. It's a really exciting topic. It's a very exciting area in this whole plant-based and animal-based protein setting. And I think with food science and nutrition, we're right in the where many things are happening. I'll speak about that. A few words about me. I'm actually since 2 years here at the U Mann. Have been, of course, with the whole pandemic, been a very intense period, but also really a period to get to know this amazing department and the great programs that we have. I previously was in a similar academic position in California, so I'm also comparing a bit the Californian scene with the Minnesota scene. And prior to becoming a full-time academic, I worked for industry, mainly for Nestle, for many years in Switzerland. I feel very privileged to be at the University of Minnesota for a number of reasons. First and foremost, actually working with young people and helping them to actually find their way in these really exciting areas of food science, nutrition, and dietetics. It's really a great adventure, which I share with many of my colleagues. And then the way we're actually are positioned here with food science and nutrition in the Twin Cities area, in Minnesota and the upper Midwest, with this amazing collection of food industry, with this very deep historical ties to food processing and agriculture, of course, because that are the inputs, but then also with nutrition connecting to the health research and the health, the healthcare institutions in Minnesota, which are world class. So we're in an amazing spot for food science and nutrition. And that you will also see reflected in where we engage. So in food science, I'll mainly be talking about that, and a few words about nutrition. Traditionally, we've been very strong in dairy research. And to me, one of the things is that we should remain strong in dairy research. It's also, it's connected still to dairy proteins. There's still many things to be happening there. It's an extremely valuable, protein source, extremely valuable animal feed food commodity. On the other hand, where we're engaging since a number of years is in this plant protein sphere, because, as it was mentioned by one of the other panelists, we need really to ramp up the protein output up to 2050 to be able to feed in a nourishing manner the whole population, the global population. So I think in where we try to engage as departments, and on one hand supporting the known commodities, very often animal-based if we talk proteins, and on the other hand try really to further that research and that development in the area of plant proteins, these alternative protein crops. And there we are located in CFANS, the College of Food, Agriculture and Natural Resource Sciences, where there's all this work going on from the field, plant breeding, soil health, agricultural technology, delivering new crops, which actually in a more sustainable way. And with food science and then with nutrition, we'll look at how these crops can be converted into a new generation of products that are appealing to consumers, that are of course safe to eat, but also that are nutritious. So I think our disciplines are that pivotal in enabling this transition to happen, this exchange into novel crops and specifically novel protein crops, by allowing these, understanding these conversions and actually allowing them to happen on basis of a well understood technology based on a really scientific understanding of these systems. A second important challenge there is actually education of the new generation of professionals in food science and nutrition. And that's the great thing that we combine here at the U, the research as well as the training. And there, what I see happening, and where I think we believe should be going much more, is also emphasizing this broad portfolio of novel and traditional crops and ingredient streams that we have, that students feel empowered to work with them and actually work for specific communities and bringing out foods that are nourishing, but also actually appealing and fit in the lifestyles in these communities. So that is just a few words about me and about our programs. And as I mentioned, I'm really pleased to be on this panel, and I'm looking very much forward to this conversation.
Thank you very much, Job. So the Bold Open decided that with these panelists, we should really have some starter questions. Or we have some experts in the field here, and there's some things that we would like to get their perspective on. But you can also add your questions to the conversation through your chat portal. We do ask that you remain muted, but you can use your chat portal if you would like to ask specific questions to the group as a whole, or to an individual that's on our panel today. And I would also encourage you panelists, if somebody makes a statement or makes an observation while they're answering a question, feel free to continue that conversation back and forth. I'm going to start, and we'll go in alphabetical order again, Sarah, so that means we're going to be starting with you. What does the overall expected growth in protein demand mean for your organization, and how is your organization preparing to meet that opportunity?
Thanks, Dan. It's a wonderful opportunity. Anytime you have the option to grow, it's a great experience for our industry. And you have that on two different fronts. When you look at food supply and protein supply in particular, you have both these developing countries that are reaching the level of stability that they're able to consume more protein. So we're excited for that piece. But then also for the turkey industry in particular, the industrialized nations now are turning to turkey and poultry meat in particular, because they like a lot of the different components that turkey offers. From everything from the fact that, one, it's a very lean protein that's very nutritious and healthy for consumers. And then also from the fact that it's a sustainable product. You know, we use literally everything when it comes to the turkey. And then also the litter is a great a source of nutrients for organic farmers in particular, use it a lot in their crops, as do other farmers. And so it's just a great sustainable industry that we have here in the state. In addition to that, turkey meat is just really affordable. So we have a lot of opportunities, and people are seeing it in a different way than it's not just a Thanksgiving meal. People are now looking at turkey as an everyday component of their meal planning. But as far as what we are looking at to prepare for this growth and expansion in protein is we need to address some issues that we have. Workforce challenges remain a problem for us within the turkey industry. I don't think that's unique to us, but certainly trying to attract people to enter the field, whether you're the farmer that's in the barns, or you're the scientist that is helping to provide the research that's really necessary for us to grow and be even more proactive. Those are all of the things that we look at and how we can be more attractive to people to entering this career side. We also we're preparing on feed challenges, and I was excited to see Hormel's proposal here today in talking about what are some non-traditional feed alternatives that we could be looking at. And I think really that's the feather in the cap of the turkey industry, at least from what I've experienced, is that they really look for innovations to grow and advance. So certainly those are some things that we're looking to prepare for, as well as just overall research of how can we maximize our production and just be more efficient in everything that we do. Product diversity is another way too. I'll talk about that a little bit more, but we try to look at ways that we can appeal more to consumers. And I think that that will help us in meeting the supply demand as well. And then obviously biosecurity remains a concern for us and a challenge that we always look at.
Very good, Sarah. Thank you. And of course, if there is a feather in your cap, that would be a turkey feather, I guess. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Julie, how about Purus's perspective on meeting that demand or coming out to meet that opportunity?
Absolutely. Very exciting times. We're seeing plant protein growth just really exploding. It is growing from a small base in comparison to animal-based proteins. And I think at the end of the day, we're all going to need to work together because we're going to need everything that we've got in our toolbox, in our arsenal to really meet the demands that are coming our way over the next 10, 20, 30 plus years. So from the Purist perspective, we're looking at several different areas so that we can meet the demand for this growth. First, of course, is efficiency of our current operations, efficiency of the things that we're currently doing every day. I think that's always sort of the first step. Secondly, I would say introducing novel proteins, additional proteins, plant-based proteins into the industry, whether it's from canola and pea and soy, or is it from some of the kind of groundbreaking products like lupin and additional proteins that are coming down the road that consumers and customers really don't know that much about yet. So really getting the word out on some of that innovation that's coming from just a crop perspective. I think making more available, so obviously putting more capacity to be planting the seeds, growing the crops, bringing them to an ingredient platform that then can be used to produce more plant-based products. So bringing more of our capacity into our plants and having the ability to translate that to larger volumes so that we can get it out in the marketplace. Lastly, I think there's a very big piece that we can do that actually marries into meeting the growth opportunity, which is when we're educating folks on what plant-based eating means and how it's working for their diet, for their health and wellness, for helping the planet, for really kind of rounding out the contribution they're making. I think that education piece is something that's going to help us bring folks to the level of where we are today in plant-based and really continue to drive more opportunities for growth as they learn more in the space.
All right, thanks, Julie. David, how about the pork producers and your job as you look at the expected growth? What does that opportunity look like for you?
Well, I think first of all, as we look at growth, I mean, it's got to be first and foremost profitable growth. And to grow for growth's sake without profitability, isn't going to serve anyone very well, at least very long. And so with that in mind, as we do grow, and I do believe that we will continue to grow, we need to make sure that we're matching up, the available pigs that farms are producing to packing capacity, and to make sure that we're not oversupplying those plants. And then because that puts tremendous downward pressure on prices for farmers when that happens. And so we need to make sure that we're much more aligned than we've probably ever been. And whether that is through alignment or whether that's through integration, I think you're going to see more and more of that. Of the last 5 packing plants that have been built, all of them have some degree of farmer ownership. And so that's been an interesting thing to watch. And I think that helps with matching up that plant capacity and production issue to make sure that we're disciplined there. Then I think as we look at growth, we've had tremendous growth in exports. And so we're exporting about 30% of all the pork that is produced here in the United States. And so some things that come with that and gearing up, because that market is going to continue to be there, but it sometimes comes in fits and starts. And so that's where things around trade policy and, you know, tariffs and SPS issues. I mean, all of those kinds of things become really important if you're an exporting country. And the other piece that goes with that is we need to make sure that we're diversifying our exports to where we're not just dependent on a handful of countries, because that can in itself create risk if you've got a lot of your eggs, so to speak, since we've got turkeys on here, in one basket. And so that's another thing that our national organizations are working very hard on, is to really diversify that list of export customers. You know, today, for example, almost 10%, about 9% of all the pork we produce in the United States is being exported to China. A couple of years ago, that was almost nothing, okay? And so it's great business to have now, and we really only have that business because of disease problems that they have there. But we need to plan for the future, you know, when and if they get those disease issues actually under control. Domestically, our demand has been really good we've had probably our biggest, in fact, I know we've had our largest increase in domestic demand over the last 2 years than we've seen in a long time. And part of that is pork can fit into kind of two categories. It can be fun, okay? So whether you're talking about bacon or ribs or pulled pork or that sort of thing, and it can be just something that's really healthy as you look at, you know, sirloin, tenderloin, loins, and so it can fit in both places. And I think some of the innovation that's come there has been tremendous, and our domestic demand has been good. And we can't forget that we fit in almost everyone's checkbook from a standpoint of affordability. And I don't think that we can lose that as we look at supplying food to everyone. And so that affordability piece is big too.
Very good. And Job, how does the university system look at this expected growth and potential opportunity?
I think the growth should be both in actually in volume and amount of actual protein on the market to feed the population in 2050. I would say it also should be growth and added value, because that's a critical industry for a critical thing for industry as well as for agriculture. And if you then look at food science and then also nutrition, the key thing is actually where we should look at is understanding functionality. How can we tune functionality of protein-based foods in a way that they actually do what consumers expect? And it can be an increased nutritional benefit, it can be some kind of texture, it can be flavor, that can be the whole perception of a food product. And this one concept actually pertains both to, I would say, the more classical ingredient streams as well as to the novel ones, which are, for instance, plant-based foods. So I'll just say a few words about that. Let's think on one hand about dairy. As Shannon has shown as one of his introductory slides, we're one of the main dairy producing states in the United States. And dairy is it's an area with extremely valuable, very complex ingredient milk. In order to add value, we need really to able to tune that functionality of milk and its various components. So that Hint is actually doing a lot of science on these type of materials that translates into, I could say, maybe certain nutritional products, or maybe infant formula, or all kinds of techno-functional ingredients. Same thing, actually, the same type of science we'll need for the plant-based sphere, because we have proteins which are from very different properties. They're definitely not properties that we easily see converted to food that consumers want to eat. So we really need to understand how to tune that and manipulate, transform these proteins into the foods that appeal with consumers. A big drive currently is going on in this plant-based meat, but that shouldn't be the only thing. You can use these proteins in shakes, in pasta analogs, in whatever types of variety of food. So I think a lot of work needs to be done as well to enable that conversion to happen. So for our department, it means that we really have to focus on that research to support the industries in these various areas, as well as continue to educate our students, on the principles of the scientific principles they will need later on in their jobs to be able to engage in product development, in quality assurance, and all these type of positions that come with the industry. So I would say we definitely need to have a close look at the fine properties of these diverse proteins, and in order to enable that product development to happen, both with the classical ingredient streams, and I mentioned dairy, as well as with these novel protein ingredients, because we really need to give it a kick to be able to get to the products that the consumers want to eat and want to purchase in the end.
Very good. Let's move to our second question to get us started. And remember, if you have a question you'd like the panelists to address, you can put that in our chat portal, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can. We're going to start with Julie this time, and do Julie, Dave, Job, and then Sarah. What protein innovation areas in your organization, let me start that whole question over. What protein innovation areas is your organization exploring at this time?
Sure.
Julie?
So at Purus, we are, as I mentioned in the introduction, we are really building this end-to-end food chain, food company, where we're starting really back with the seed and the farm, going into the ingredients and the ingredients that we're providing to our customers and to the marketplace. And then we're also working on the sort of the front lines to produce and help folks understand how to bring quality plant-based products to the market, so that when they get their first trial, they get a repeat trial because they're so good that folks want to try them again and bring them into their homes. So from an innovation perspective, we're focusing really in those 3 or 4 pillars. We have very specific programs that we're working on in each of those. So when you think about seed and growing the initial parts of the crop, we're looking there in a lot of sustainability innovation. So how to lead and drive sustainability measures that can be adopted and accepted with other plant protein companies, whether it be domestic or global, so that we have some metrics that are being utilized across something that's comparable, that we can look at across different crops and actually make comparisons that are meaningful. I would say secondly, we're looking to have the cleanest ingredients, cleanest label on our ingredients. Consumers today are very concerned about what goes into their food and what ingredients are being used to produce their food. So we're working very hard to have the best quality ingredients coming from peas and plant materials, but that have the cleanest label and cleanest processing available. So there's a lot of innovation we're doing there. And I would say the last 2 areas are in the finished food area, where we're helping to bring development, so product development and food development forward with our ingredients into finished food categories. For example, a plant-based type of dairy product, or a plant-based burger, even plant-based bakery type items, where we're removing some components and making them 100% plant-based. And then lastly, we're really just trying to be efficient and to valorize our facilities, so that we are utilizing all of the parts of the plant, so that waste is not something that we're dealing with or producing in a way that is negative to what we're doing for bringing plant-based forward and for the planet.
Very good. David, let's get the Minnesota Pork Board's perspective on something that you're working on in protein innovation.
I'd say you may not think of it so much as innovation, but it's something that's just different than what we've done necessarily in the past. And our national organization has been working quite a bit with this. Is just ground pork as an option that people can have versus hamburger or other ground proteins. Traditionally, what happens with ground pork is that it ends up going into sausage, and the reason that it goes into sausage is that there's much better margin there traditionally than there is on just selling ground pork, as you look at from a processing standpoint. But On the flip side, I mean, consumers' tastes have changed a little bit. And so that's one area. Again, it sounds relatively simple, but it does take time. It does take exposure to people to make sure that they, can look at it just like they can look at whether it's ground chicken, turkey, or a hamburger. They're just not necessarily used to seeing it in the retail case. See, the other thing that again, this is more at our national level, is really spending time with data, okay, and data analytics, and bringing that work to retailers to help them be profitable with placing our product in their case. Retailers are no different than any other business. They've got a profit incentive. And if we can show them how they can be more profitable with having pork in their meat case, that's something that we're bringing as a value add for them. We're not interested necessarily in using a lot of coupons or discounting or that sort of thing. We're interested in bringing data to retailers to help them make money, and not necessarily discounting our product in order to have it move. We want it to be able to move on its own.
Let's get the perspective from the University of Minnesota when they talk about protein innovation. Dr. Ubik, what are you working on?
Let me first say a word. Innovation in this setting on these systems, actually, it's multidisciplinary. So one of the things we always ensured, and that's also one of my main roles as a department head in this transition phase for our department, to ensure that we have the various competencies in place to be able to tackle the complex nature of the questions that arise to creating that functionality in the classical ingredient streams like dairy, where we're looking really more and more into specific components and high added value, as well as in these plant-based transformations. So which means understanding the material at the molecular level, to being able to understand and work out their nutritional impact. So something like protein quality, it's something we actually have the capability to analyze it and bring that into a wider understanding of, for instance, matrix effects that food brings, to processing. So we're currently, looking very closely at our extrusion capabilities, including, characterization of these very, high solid type of systems, which you use in meat analogs, for instance. To also the perception. How do consumers perceive the food? So things like sensory and the wider food appeal as a research topic. So innovation is multidisciplinary, and these days you can't get away by just driving one axis. You need to really be able to take on a whole complex project or problem with all these areas. We already mentioned plant proteins. That's currently a big driver of many of our research activities. The Plant Protein Center has been very instrumental in driving innovation in this area, and actually is a center, is a nucleus of a lot of things that happen in the United States and internationally at the moment, and it's giving a lot of actually emphasis to and momentum to activities at the U. But plant protein is not the only area. I mentioned already dairy, that's specific to my department, but also the animal protein field is still very important. That's in CFANS, and it's one of the big areas. And I think, for instance, Dave mentioned a number of topics that resonate very closely with what goes on in our animal science department, for instance.
Very good. And Sarah, over to you, I guess, for perspective from the Minnesota turkey growers.
Yeah, the protein, we're seeing a lot of protein partnerships within the turkey industry. It's kind of like we're mimicking what you see in the craft brewing side of this segment. We have Jenny-O Turkey Store. They just came out, I think it was in June, that they are making burger patties, turkey burger patties that are mixed with black beans, whole grain brown rice, and pepitas. And it's just kind of exciting to see that kind of collaboration. I think we're going to see more of that to come, where you're mixing kind of plant-based proteins with animal protein to create a product that consumers are really going to enjoy. Other innovations that we see on the front, we've got Northern Pride from the Thief River Falls area. They have a product, what I would consider to be kind of the filet mignon of the poultry side of industry. They've got a turkey steak that they have created. And so I think people are thinking beyond what their traditional meat options are out there and trying to diversify the products that they offer consumers. And I think that's great. It's what the consumers are looking for. But outside of that, when we're looking at innovations within protein, a couple of things, we've invested in research that really creates what I consider to be a Teflon gut for turkeys. There has been heavy emphasis within the turkey industry on managing their gut health. We were talking about probiotics way before Hollywood was, and so they've been very innovative about that. So we've invested some research dollars into creating a healthier gut that helps to eliminate or inhibit salmonella within meat products from the gut perspective. And that's going to be really helpful in reducing recalls and making sure that food is safe and protecting that component of the food safety chain. Outside of that, too, we've also invested some research dollars into salmonella, again, and that would help us to reduce the use of antibiotics by hitting salmonella before it reaches other places, or infects the bird, I should say. So yeah, those are just a couple. I have more examples of the research that we do, but we place a heavy emphasis on that to make sure that our birds are the healthiest and that we're practicing the best management practices possible.
Thank you, Sarah. So let's go back and change question 1 a little bit with question number 3. In question 1, we talked about expected growth in protein demand and what the opportunities look like. Let me ask what challenges your organization is now facing in order to meet protein demand and in the innovation areas that you've mentioned before. And David, let's start with you this time.
Yeah, I think I believe it was Sarah that mentioned it before. I'd say our number one challenge is labor, skilled labor. We were at a large pork conference last week, and there was a poll that was done of the folks that were in attendance, and they were given a choice of various things that they felt were their challenges going forward, and number one was labor. And so I think, in fact, I know that that's going to be a big piece. Now with that, possibly brings some opportunity, again, for innovation. We're seeing a lot of interest in, for example, remote sensing, and saw some interesting things at a conference yesterday, utilizing cameras and audio and other sensing within barns that really to assist with animal health, with billing operation, early detection of whether it's something going wrong with water or feed, or even the activity of animals as a way to see that, hey, there may be something going on from a health standpoint. So I think the whole remote sensing piece is going to bring some things to the table to from a standpoint of labor and also efficiency, and animal health. Quite honestly, if you've got some things that you can do with remote sensing that makes it to where a person doesn't have to go into that barn physically as much during the day, it's a way then to take away some biosecurity risk, because every time a person goes into that barn, you end up having some biosecurity risk. And so we'll see where some of that brings us, but I think that that's one way that we can end up dealing with that. And there's an awful lot of thought and talent and now money starting to go into that whole remote sensing piece that I think you're going to see developments over the next few years. Other than that, challenge-wise, I mentioned before, the whole export piece and public policy around that we're going to have to, I don't think the work will ever be done there. That's just going to take an awful long time, and we've got some real potential, but the politics and some of that can be interesting, to say the least, on dealing with some of those countries and even our own government in some cases. I'd say the other thing, and I think that some folks kind of maybe didn't know what to do with this whole sustainability piece. And, I'm happy to talk more about that, but boy, as we're digging into it, and we've got our own sustainability platform that we're piloting right now within Minnesota on farms, we're finding out that we're a whole lot better than we ever quite honestly dreamed that we were. From a standpoint of water use, from a standpoint of greenhouse gas emissions. Also, as you look at, as we recycle manure, and a closed loop system to, using that manure on crops and then feeding those crops obviously to the livestock, and avoiding then the use of commercial fertilizer, which quite honestly uses an awful lot of water and an awful lot of basically fuel to make it. And to where if you get that offset calculated into our greenhouse gas emission equation, we can get to neutral. And we're seeing some folks that can do that today. And I think we're even going to get much better at it as we go down the road.
Let me ask on a follow-up, David, is that sustainability bar higher because your producers have been innovative?
The whole question on the bar is a good one, because as you measure sustainability, it's like, okay, where's your starting point, right? What's your baseline? And so, as we look at it though, is that it's going to be a continuum. I mean, I don't think you'll ever be quote done. I think it's going to be more of a journey. And so part of why I think our sustainability is so good is, first of all, just plain where we're located. Okay, so the upper Midwest is a great place to raise protein. And it doesn't make any difference if it's turkeys or if it's pigs. It's a great place to do it because we've got really skilled people. We've got the land base to recycle that manure, and it makes us low cost. Okay, so there's not a lower cost place in the world, all other things being even, to raise pigs than right here in the upper Midwest. Okay, and so then if you can level the playing field and a whole bunch of other things, especially trade wise and so on, you should come out pretty well. But so for example, the manure is on the asset side of the balance sheet here in the upper Midwest. If you go to the East Coast, it's on the it's a liability. It's a cost to deal with it, okay? Because you don't have the matchup of land and the manure that is being produced. So it's things like that we're going to continue to get better at. I think the other thing too is we just haven't measured a lot of these things before. And so until you measure it, you can't improve it, right? I mean, that's the things that keep being talked about. And first of all, measure it, get your baseline, and then we'll just keep moving.
Very good. Dr. Eubank, let's go back to you and talk more about not so much the opportunities, but some of the challenges that the university is seeing in order to meet those protein demands.
I already half mentioned one of the challenges, and we're actually in the transition phase with our department from a great past to a great future, with a lot of impact for our stakeholders. That's a process we'll be navigating in the coming years. There's one other thing which I'd like to take the opportunity to comment on here, and Dave already mentioned, is actually labor. And that's something which we definitely need to address, at the U, but it's in a topic in the wider United States, is that we're not training enough food scientists to fill the demand of the industry in the United States. And that industry is actually also changing very rapidly, making it a really exciting place. We have I would say, the established food industry, but a lot of also novel players coming into the field, specifically in the plant protein area. That we should really group into that, also that are hiring food scientists from the programs in the US, and also a lot of smaller entrepreneurs and culturally diverse entrepreneurs coming in. And at this stage, in Minnesota, but also in the wider United States, and I'm this year actually the chair of the Council of Food Science Administrators, which coordinates between the 45 IFT approved programs in the United States, we see really a huge demand in food science graduates and not enough students coming in. So one of the things we really want to address is to really position food science as a critical discipline where students can really make a difference for our society, a difference for the people, and at the same time have just a fantastic career. So, and this we really need to navigate. Students are looking for good careers, but are also actually looking for a purpose in life and contribute with something. And food science is really an area where you can contribute. You can really help to bring sustainable foods to the consumer in a healthful manner, culturally respectful manner, and it's a great area to be. But we have a lot of work to do there.
Thank you. Sarah, I think you may have touched on some of your challenges when you were talking about opportunities as well, but let's come back to that and see what the turkey growers are seeing as challenges as they try to meet that demand.
Yes, absolutely. So labor remains to be a challenge for us. And Dave had touched on this too. Like I said, it's not unique to the turkey industry. It's all throughout agriculture. And I like what Job just said in the fact that food science is an area where you can contribute to the betterment of society. Absolutely. And just being part of that, just hoping that we can get our young talent to understand how important our food supply chain is and contributing to solutions on that front. So excited to hear that it's not just something that we're pushing, that you is pushing, pork is, and a whole host of other industries that are promoting that. In addition to that, just the food supply or feed supply inputs that we have, when we have weather like we have here in Minnesota with the drought and the impact that has on our partners in agriculture, our corn industry, our soybean industries, that impacts all of us. As Dave mentioned, we are blessed that we are kind of a one-stop shop when it comes to agriculture in the state of Minnesota. We've got great corn producers, we have great soybean producers, and then also turkey and pork and the other industries too. But when they suffer, we all suffer. So when they're experiencing this drought that we're experiencing, that drives up the cost and obviously makes it more challenging for us to produce an affordable product for consumers. So just concerned about that. And that's where, efforts to look at other means of getting greater maximization of those products, and they work with us on those issues, I think will help set us up for long-term success overall. So those are some of the big things. I mentioned product diversity too. And then of course the biosecurity issue always remains a concern for us, and it's a challenge too. And one of the things I think about with these developing countries as they're looking to have their own egg systems and bringing in turkey production within their countries rather than importing it from the US, my concern is what does that mean when it comes to biosecurity? When we have a disease outbreak in Europe or Asia or any of these other places, we worry about it here in the US because we wonder when will it hit us. And so we're just concerned that everybody is practicing good biosecurity measures, not just here in the United States or in Minnesota, but globally so that we can protect livestock production.
If you're just joining us, we do ask that you remain muted and that you ask your questions through the chat portal. And Julie, let's go to you for what Purist sees as some of the challenges meeting the coming demand.
Absolutely. I think a lot of what I'm hearing from the other folks on the panel is similar. So yes, talent continues to be a struggle, no matter the industry or segment of food and innovation that you're in. I think this is probably the first time in my 25 years of being a food scientist and biochemist that I feel the shortage kind of in my own backyard and in my own priorities for our business. So I think that's one thing that all of the universities and across the US, there's a lot of great food science universities. They're all really working hard right now to drive this initiative forward. And I know because Purist is working with several of them to do so. So I would say talent and food scientists are definitely at a shortage. That's one challenge we're having that really stagnates our innovation strength and power forward. Additionally, I think challenges that we face in plant-based protein is, plant-based proteins are not fundamentally the same as their comparative proteins. So when we're looking at developing new products, plant proteins behave differently. They have different protein subunits. They perform differently in liquid or in structured extrusion, other food processes that you take them through. So I'd say one of the challenges that we face is bringing the plant proteins in a clean label way to life so that they can mimic or they can replace in some cases the existing proteins. So we know that there's several categories of innovation in plant-based. One is just straight up innovative plant-based products. We also know there's a segment where we're looking at blending animal products and plant-based products in order to either increase yields or increase some degree of water retention, or just to create, again, maybe a product that brings somebody who's looking to include plant-based in their diet a little closer, but they're still consuming the products they always consume. The last category is really that true replacement where folks are just saying, please make me a burger that doesn't have any meat in it. And so the challenges that we're facing in plant-based that we're really, the whole industry is innovating on, is the functionality matching, the gelling, the emulsification strength, the properties that are needed to create good products, the organoleptics, so the flavor, the mouthfeel, the taste that you get from the product, the craveability, the ability to want to purchase and consume this product going forward. And then lastly, the nutrition piece. The nutritional qualities are different for different types of proteins. And so making sure that we're wrapping that all into a package and then educating and communicating what the benefits are of that, those continue to be challenges that we face as we move through driving plant-based forward.
Very good. And I do want to get a perspective on the 10 challenges that were presented yesterday on the first day of the Bold Open. But we do have some questions coming in from some of the people who have joined us virtually today. The first one, I think I will direct to Dr. Eubank first, and maybe Julie will want to weigh in too. Are you familiar with the opportunities with protein through utilizing upcycled ingredients such as spent grains or eggshell membranes and that kind of protein? Dr. Eubank, are we working or thinking about working in that area?
Yeah, I'm not working myself in this area, but it's definitely these type of things are really important, because it's not only the pure, protein sources as they come from essentially from the field that we then, as a plant-based protein, try to transform into something. And Julie very rightly highlighted that some of the scientific challenges there, but it's also the whole waste stream, and I would even broaden that into these other components that we have in food. For instance, if we start separating out a protein from an ingredient source, we also have other things. We have fibers, we have starches. We're also looking for these type of uses. So spent grains, I know there's a lot of really innovative work going on through this area to actually to add more value than using spent grains as an animal feed. But also, these things like that, the eggshell proteins, are all these niche sources of proteins that can really, either they bring unique functionalities to the field, or they really address some kind of waste problem, some kind of sustainability issue that we have. So I think these are really, really important topics. And I think in the coming years, we'll see many more of these type of, these problems actually coming up as being relevant to address.
Julie, did you have a follow-up there?
Yes, I would just completely agree that this is upcycling and valorization is really, I think, the next generation of products that we're going to be seeing. There's from every product that's produced today, there is some effluent or some stream or some piece of it that is being looked at just a little bit differently today. Maybe flipping the coin and saying, instead of using this as something that we've been washing down the drain, what is it that we can do to make value of it? If you look at the dairy industry, I mean, really, whey was many years ago simply flushed down the drain, and now whey is produced and is one of the most valuable pieces of the full cycle of dairy. So I think you're going to see a lot more of it, and I think it's vital to the food industry's success from a monetary standpoint and from the ability to actually feed more people with things that we're wasting right now.
Another question from our viewers today. What are the sustainability metrics that you are using to quantify and qualify progress as compared to what baseline, where is this being reported? And I think all of you have mentioned sustainability a little bit. Sarah, you would be the first to respond if we're going to continue to go in the rotation, but if you don't have a response to that, we'll move to Julie and then on to David and Dr. Eubank.
It's an important question, and Dave had mentioned this earlier, is that, where are you measuring from? And I think that's what becomes the challenge for us. In the turkey industry, we have been very sustainable, especially when you consider that the same bird that was produced in 1939 compared to today, we use half of the amount of feed and get a larger bird than what you had in 1939. So again, it's the advancements in research in the use of probiotics and just being smarter about our nutrition for our turkeys. It's no different than in humans. When you do a better job of managing your nutrition, you're going to get better results for humans. The same applies to animal agriculture, and we've been able to achieve that. And when we do that, we have a smaller footprint because we are consuming less and just maximizing the resources that we have available to us. But you're right, the baseline piece is the key nugget. If you're going to just measure from today, well, we've made a lot of progress today, and it's not fair to not account for those improvements.
Others on the panel want to weigh in?
I'd like to make a comment on one very critical metric here. That's actually the energy input in our food system. We should all be aware that we're using over 12 calories of energy input to produce 1 nutritional calorie of food, which is definitely long-term unsustainable. And there I see for food science actually two roles. On one hand, actually, I see in the industry huge emphasis since about 10, 15 years on minimizing resource uses. Energy is one, but also water, et cetera, and reducing emissions. That I would say is a direct sustainability consideration. The other thing I think is long-term going to be much more important is how can we work with processes that are lower impact, so completely rethink processes that have that lower impact. Think about fermentation, for instance, as a low impact process, and convert crops that have and ingredients that have naturally a smaller footprint. So I think food science there goes in two directions. One is directly working with the industry to reduce the footprint of specific current processes, which has been very, very important. But then the longer term impact is going to be, say, how can we transform the way we produce our foods to have overall that, I would say, an order of magnitude lower impact environmentally.
And David, you talked about sustainability. Do you have a metric that the pork producers use to kind of start that process?
Yeah, it's really kind of an all of the above. So we're looking at feed use first and foremost, because feed is the largest single piece of our carbon footprint. Okay, it just is. So the process that happens to grow corn and soybeans and anything else that's being fed is the largest piece. So that's number one. Obviously, we're looking at energy use. We really don't use very much energy in the big picture of it all at the farm level. Okay, and now you get at the packing plant level. Obviously, you've got energy that's used there, no different than any other processing plant, regardless of what you're going to be processing. The other bigger piece that we look at is water use. There has been some incredible gains in because many barns now have water meters on them. So we know what the water use actually is. And again, you can't do anything about any of these things unless you actually measure it. And so that's something that's very common now. And there's new equipment that can be used, and some folks are using, that is just plain more efficient in delivering water, to where you don't have the waste that occurs. And that helps the farmer in two ways. One is, if you're on rural water and purchasing water, well, that's going to save them money. And then the other thing is, as we pump out the manure storage underneath the barn, if you've got a lot of waste water that is there, that's just a waste. Then you're hauling water out to the field and it doesn't have a nutrient value. Okay, so it saves some money there. You'll more than pay for your water meter to kind of know what's going on, and also just to monitor your system. The other thing that our industry did is worked with University of Arkansas. They've got a very highly developed sustainability center there to look at actually measuring our carbon use, water use, and so on. Had a baseline of about roughly 55 years ago and looked at change over time. Okay, and so that was completed about 5-6 years ago now. But as we're looking at that, even where it was as an average 5 or 6 years ago to what we're measuring now with our pilot farms, in the project that we're working on, we're actually using 4 times less water on our farms here than even what was calculated as a nationwide average 6 years ago. As we look at the storage of manure, for example, which in Minnesota for hog farms is all in concrete containers that are underneath the buildings. If you contrast that with an open lagoon, okay, you have about 75% less greenhouse gas emissions that come from the manure storage that is underneath the building compared to an open lagoon. So it's some things like that until you have the technology to actually measure what's going on with these things, you can't, again, make progress going forward. But those are just some examples, things that we're looking at and are going to continue to.
Thank you, David. Julie, we have a question here that is directed to you. So you mentioned a priority being the need to educate people about the benefits of plant-based diets, both in terms of nutrition and the planet. What have you learned about the kind of educational efforts that have been successful? And what have you learned about what doesn't work? They are curious because they are working on an exhibit about this particular issue, and they want to learn what has and has not worked elsewhere as you try to do the education piece.
That's a great question. I think right now what we're seeing working, so first of all, it's very early, and it seems a lot of folks are now realizing this is a place where more efforts are needed. The goal is not to sell anyone on what they should or shouldn't be doing. It's more to present the facts and show what some of the benefits might be to adding some plants to your diet. So I think what we're seeing is a live action, hands-on, really getting them integrated in seeing what the products look like, what the ingredients going into the products look like, almost working backwards. You start with the product, you go into the ingredients, you talk about where the ingredients are coming from, you talk about the crops and the fields they were grown, you talk about, just like the last question we had, the sustainability piece and the regenerative agriculture piece, the fact that we're using less water to produce these products. We're using less fertilizer because pulses fix nitrogen in the soil and actually help to regenerate some of that nitrogen needed and reduce the need for fertilizer. So I think right now what we're seeing, to answer your question, is a full package of education that really takes them through what's going on and lets them sort of live through it. What we're seeing not work is a pamphlet that says, try plant-based foods. They're wonderful for the planet and good for your body. We find that a lot of that kind of print that just has pictures on it, it's people have a lot going on in their head today. They're very busy. They're distracted by other things. So I think having something that is an interactive workstation or a community development project. We've seen a couple of those where community centers or places where people congregate together, having a demonstration that just shows, did you know this product contains pea protein or soy protein or rice protein? And did you know this is why we're suggesting that you should learn more about this? So I think, again, hands-on, really connect the why. Why should they do this? Why does this matter? Why is this important? I think bringing those pieces together will move the needle a lot faster than handing out a pamphlet or showing a video on YouTube.
Thanks, Julie. I would encourage those who are participating today to maybe go to the chat box and look, because there are some comments being made that are not in the form of a question, but you can see some people's comments about plant proteins and microbial proteins. But we do have another question here. Is anyone doing work looking at cultures that have primarily plant-based foods to see if we can translate some of those plant-based proteins into our foods? We need to think more broadly about what uses can be made out of plant-based proteins. And Julie, you have generated some people's interests, sparked their interest in these plant-based foods. Are you looking at what other cultures are doing?
Yes, yes. I actually read that question and I was thinking that they meant plant-based cultures for dairy. The microbial cultures that go into the products. I misread that.
I may have misread it.
but I think, yes. So I think one of the most interesting pieces of plant-based in my view is that when we look, we spend a lot of time in North America trying to match existing products that are on the market, and maybe it's a burger, maybe it's something different. And in many other cultures, many other societies, they just started with vegetables and vegetable proteins and vegetable and grain blends just to start. They weren't trying to mimic any type of burger or dairy milk or anything like that. And I think there's some learnings that we all can take from that viewpoint, because they are just truly innovating around the goodness, the good taste, the good flavor, the good functionality of these whole food ingredients or of these plant-based food protein ingredients. So really taking it from the vantage point of, let's just innovate something new around plant ingredients. That's one way that I think the industry is going to be, it's starting now, but it's small. I think we're going to start to see that more and more. We're going to continue to try to maybe mimic a couple of products just so that we can get those folks who are on the edge of wanting to try it, maybe to move over and at least give it a shot. But I think we can learn a lot from other cultures, and we can learn a lot from how others have been consuming plant protein for ages.
Very good. We need to wrap up in about 10 minutes, and I know that Shannon wants to come back in and thank you personally for being here today, but I wanted to get your perspective, the four of you, one more time on the 10 challenges that were presented yesterday. And maybe, not grading them, but just giving us which one resonated most with your organization and why. And I think we'll start with the University of Minnesota and Job.
Yeah, I'm actually taking the opportunity to loop that into also that question about actually difference in food cultures and the way we actually consume plant-based proteins, but maybe also animal-based proteins. But I think there are a lot of scientifically driven challenges in the this year's list, which is fantastic, and I associate with, for instance, the one on solvent replacement and more sustainable solvents. But I think what I want to mention there is the one of actually educating the Generation Z and the millennials about dairy proteins, because that's a traditional dairy-based food, and that's going to stay with us and should stay with us. In the whole cultural setting, we should also not forget that in the past, also in the United States, we've been eating plant-based proteins in a similar way, and that actually has slowly, left our diet. For instance, we've been eating more beans and more pulses in the past, and because they're difficult to prepare, they take more time to prepare. Actually, we have started to eat less and less and less of them. So I think we should also think about our own cultures. in the valuable aspect in there, and see how we can bring them back, as well as different cultures, where the Asian communities definitely do a lot of work traditionally on all kinds of soy-based type of products with interesting flavors and textures and high nutritional quality. So coming back to the challenges, I think that the one on the dairy one is one which resonates, because on one hand we should really look at these novel proteins, but it doesn't mean that we should then forget about the qualities of the existing proteins. And that's what I see very often with the new generations, that they tend to flip over completely, and culture is a very dynamic thing. So that's my first choice of the challenges here.
Sarah, which of the 10 challenges resonated with you?
I have to tell you, it's hard to choose because there were just so many good projects, but obviously the Hormel one rang out the most to me in looking at the non-traditional feed sources, whether it's worms or insects and the like. I think I'll be excited to see any results from that. But obviously I liked AURI's meat processing challenge and Cargill's increasing the shelf life of meat too. I think that's great.
Julie?
Also difficult to choose. For me, both the winter camelina and the oat byproduct were probably tied near the top. I think, as we discussed on this panel, this valorization and byproduct kind of creation or innovation, I think is really critical for us going forward in this industry.
And David, you and the pork producers get the last word here today.
Well, I agree. There were some, I thought they all were interesting, just in different ways. And so I thought the Midwest dairy one was really interesting, because I think it's always, why people make decisions, right? And kind of just the the human side of that, I think, is something that really intrigued me. And so that one I think I liked the best. And then there were a host of the other ones. The Hormel one I think was interesting. The Cargill one for sure, as you look at, because avoiding spoilage is something that all of us should agree is something that should happen. So I think those would be the three for me.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Dave Preisler, Julie Mann, Sarah Anderson, and Dr. Eubink for taking part and being on our panel today. Very interesting discussion, and helping us bring day 2 of the 2021 Bold Open to a close. We're going to get some final comments at this time from our Executive Director at AURI, Shannon Schlecht. Shannon?
Perfect. Thank you, Dan. And I agree. Thank you to all of our panelists. That was great perspectives and great discussion around protein innovation, and just the range of challenges and opportunities that each of you face on a daily basis to meet growing consumer demand and to do it in a more sustainable manner. I think it was an absolutely spot on conversation for what we're looking at, and just highlighting some of those innovation challenges that we need to be considering. Right, this global demand for protein isn't going away, right? It's growing, and there's a lot of opportunities out there, and consumer preferences are across the board, as we heard today, from animal proteins to blended proteins to plant proteins. All right, and more that we can do with dairy proteins, and it's just really great to get your thoughts and ideas around how do we go about meeting this challenge, right? And the challenge of doing it in a more sustainable manner. So great input and comments there. Just around the 10 challenges, it's always great to get your perspectives on what resonates and how we look at finding solutions to some of those industry challenges. I do encourage everybody that's participating today to take a look at the Bold Open website, or boldopenmn.com, and take a look at those challenges. And it'd be, we'd love to see a proposal come in from you to look at a partnership collaboration opportunity with one of our 10 challenge providers, to really explore solution spaces and ideation around how can we get at some of these issues that we're facing, really move the needle forward and accelerate innovation into the marketplace. That's really what the Bold Open is about, in terms of advancing, accelerating, creating new awareness about these opportunities that exist, and partnering with some of our Minnesota companies here that have such a global reach. When we heard about the comments around export opportunities and the importance of export markets, all right, and just where ingredients are sourced from and where products are going to, and just the cultural conversation as well, I thought was really intriguing. A reminder too, there is an opportunity for some one-on-one discussions yet this afternoon as well with any of those 10 challenge providers. If you haven't signed up for any of those and you want to have a more in-depth conversation, there are some 10-minute blocks available. Just sign up through the SUGO website or event platform that you entered this panel discussion on today as well. And with that, I want to thank MBOLD for the partnership for the 2021 Bold Open on looking at protein innovation and really trying to drive some opportunities. And again, really want to thank our panelists today from Minnesota Pork, Minnesota Turkey, Peterson, and the University of Minnesota for sharing perspectives on what's happening around the innovation space, what's happening here in Minnesota and across the region, and just how that has an impact across the world as we look at what's happening in the protein space. So with that, thank you everyone. Have a great rest of your day. I look forward to seeing your proposals and driving some opportunities in protein innovation. Goodbye.